Hey everybody, I'm Holly Chanel. Welcome to this condensed virtual version of my clinic, Time, Groove, Intention, the key to being a drummer in a rhythm section. Usually I play as part of a live rhythm section during this clinic to demonstrate these concepts, and I have students come up and play as well. But for the purpose of this virtual experience, I'll be playing excerpt video examples from three of my current role models and mentors, Terry Lynn Carrington, Allison Miller, and Ron Savage. So in this clinic, we'll discuss three concepts to being a successful drummer in a rhythm section: the ability to keep time, the ability to feel groove, and the ability to play everything with intention. All right, so as we get into this clinic here, so theme one is time, the concept of time. So what I'm going to be using here is a video excerpt of Terry Lynn Carrington playing a tribute to Roy Haynes back in 2010 with Maestro Danilo Perez and John Lockwood. Cool. So you can find this whole video on YouTube. It's just called Terry Lynn Carrington Tribute to Roy Haynes Part 1. It is absolutely insane. Part 1 and Part 2. So let's talk about the concept of time. Who are we listening to while we play? And this is really important. So with the concept of time, I mean, time is always moving. It never stops. When the drummer is listening to the bass is listening to the piano is listening to the drummer, time will ebb and flow. You know, if we are all collectively listening and communicating together. Time is a community effort. It really is. You know, it's not, the responsibility isn't on just one person. It's everybody together. We need to be confident in our time and where we are, but listening to the conversations happening around us. We need to be listening to others around us more than we're listening to ourselves as well, especially with jazz music. The concept of this music is, in my opinion, selflessness. It's actively listening to the people around us. And when you're actively listening to the people around you, you're in the present moment. You're not thinking about other things. You know, you're not thinking if you're rushing or dragging. You're not thinking all the places that our mind can bring us. We're actively listening to the conversations and the stories that the people, the musicians around us are telling. And when we're all doing that, you'll find that this is a theme, you know, with all three concepts. This is a theme where if we're all doing that, we're all listening to each other, time will ebb and flow together. You know, it'll move. Nothing is ever stagnant and staying the same. And, you know, and if you're thinking about time in the concept of time signature, I mean, it's the time signature could mean a different feel, but the concept of time and listening is the same. So I invite you, online audience, to test out these concepts on yourself with the groups that you're playing, with a goal of listening to the others more than you listen to yourself. That's really important. And I just want to give these examples here that are on the screen of listening material from different drumming masters that I've grown to love and respect and listen to all the time. We have Art Blakey in the Jazz Messengers album Free for All, Miles Davis and Jimmy Cobb on the Kind of Blue album, and Wayne Shorter with Elvin Jones on Speak No Evil album. So and when you're listening to these, listen to what the bass is doing, with the drums, what the comper, the either the guitarist or the pianist is doing with the drums and the bass. Really listen to that, and you can clearly see that everybody is in that active listening stage. So concept 2, groove. I have an excerpt here by the amazing Allison Miller from her most recent suite of music, Rivers in Our Veins. This is a piece called Hudson. I had the opportunity to go see this in action in Brooklyn last November, and it is unreal. You guys should all buy this record, see it if you can. So this video you'll see it doesn't talk about the groove, but you feel the groove. And when you're listening to this and watching this, focus on the groove that Allison is laying down, but also how people are responding to that groove, how the bass player is responding to the groove, the pianist, the soloist. Jenny Scheinman is the violinist here, and just watch and pay attention to how she can use different rhythmic motifs because of the groove that the rhythm section is laying down. Cool. So that's the excerpt that I chose. You can't see Allison, but she's there. She's there, I promise. You can also check this out on YouTube. So let's, listen to that groove. What are some things we want to pay attention to? What do we feel or notice about the way the rhythm section and soloists were interacting while playing this groove? Think about that. So let's actually watch this one more time. And let's think about, let's focus on how we can feel or notice, the way the rhythm section is moving around this groove. Cool. So we notice the bass line has that boom, 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 boom. And Allison is just laying down. And it's so grooving, it just sits. It sits in the pocket. And as drummers, we need to be able to groove as much as we need to be able to play time. Time and groove, to me, are one and the same. And in this case, I chose, a non-swing tune, but, groove, I mean, you really got to sit there in the pocket and notice how Allison was laying it down, the bassist was laying it down, and Jenny could just freely move within the time feel. So one question we want to think about when we're going to play as drummers or what other instrument that we play is, what does it feel like? What is it feeling like when we're sitting on the drums and playing with people? Does it feel good? Are we able to sit and just groove? I want to give some examples here. I have two. One of them is Ahmad Jamal, Point Sienna, with the drummer Vernel Fournier. It's a very famous drum groove, but I encourage you to go listen to this track and think about and observe what's happening between the pianist and the bass and the drums during this groove. And the same thing, you can go to a completely different style of music with Papa Was a Rolling Stone by the Temptations. I mean, that has a groove, simple bass line, and it just sits there in the pocket. All right, let's move on to our next concept of intention. So this is a really important concept for me, just as important as time and groove, because it's one of the things I've had to work hardest at is having intention. And that comes down to, again, being in the present moment when you're playing music. You have groove when you're in the present moment. You're able to have community time feel when you're in the present moment. When you're in the present moment, you can actively listen, and your body can actively discern and choose what to do. Everything we play needs to have intention. Why are we stroking the stick or the brush this way? Why are we hitting this part of the cymbal? Why are we hitting this part of the drum? Every choice we make should be intentional. It's because I want this sound. When you play any instrument, in this case, the drums, it's really easy to fall into habits. So there's this one time I was getting a lesson from Allison Miller, and she was watching me, kind of observing, playing, like trading fours. And I always think about this. She was noticing that every time I started to trade solo, I would start with my right hand on the snare drum every single time. Now that was a habit that I developed, and I had no idea that I had developed it. It was not intentional at all. I mean, it was just a habit. You're going to start, and it's like, bleh, do, 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 do. And I inherently, that habit isn't a bad thing, right? Like your solos aren't bad if you start every single one of them with your right hand on the snare drum, but it wasn't intentional. I didn't choose to do it. My body just did it. And I think this is a concept that's really important. And when you're intentional, you also have the ability to control your dynamics as a drummer. What separates, I truly believe that what separates a good drummer to a master is the ability to have intention, extreme intention in what you play, extreme care in what you play, with dynamics, with the way you play. It's just really important. One person in my life, Ron Savage, VP Savage, he's the current vice president of Berklee. He's also one of my great mentors. He talks about intention all the time. Everything he does and everything he plays has intention. He structures his practice, his playing, what he does, so that it's intentional. So one question, we want to ask ourselves is the sounds we make and the way we use the drums intentional? And if you're not a drummer, a main drummer watching this video, it doesn't matter if you're a saxophone player, a trumpet player, a piano player, a bass player, this goes to everybody, is the way I'm playing intentional? And as a drummer, we can ask ourselves, when do we use specific parts of the cymbals? What about when we're comping or when we're soloing? So I want to play this video, this small portion of Ron Savage playing his brush solo that he did back in 2022 during the Sound of Soul. So, one of the things I love about Ron is his brush playing, his time feel, his groove. And what I explained before was his ability to have pure intention. And every drummer, that every master drummer, Allison, Terry, Ron, Renell Fournier, Elvin Jones, Jimmy Cobb, they all had this mastery, and they all have, some of them are living, they all have this mastery of intention. And with Ron, he was telling me he practices with intention. He practices with intention so that when he's on the bandstand, he can play with intention. He purposely makes it so he can have every tool available to him when he's on the bandstand. So he practices every tool, learning, he's ambidextrous with right hand and left hands. He's just probably one of the most intentional players I've ever met. And we just want to ask ourselves, is what we're doing intentional? Are we having intention? Are we playing in the present moment? Or are we thinking about what we had for lunch, or what we're going to be doing next? When we're playing in the present moment, we're able to have time, groove, and intention. So let's recap what we did here, what we talked about. Oh, before we recap, here's a rundown of everything I just talked about with intention, right? Everything has intention. We want to be fully present in the moment. And we want to try not to fall into unknown habits. Know what you do and choose what you do. That's the biggest thing. We want to be able to choose what we do and play what we hear. It's the worst feeling in the world when I'm on stage and I hear something and I go to execute it and I can't play what I hear. When you're practicing with intention, you can choose what you do and you can play what you hear. So, okay, now let's recap. So time, we talked about, what are we listening for? What are we listening for? It's a community effort. Time is always moving, right? The drummer's listening to the bass and the bass is listening to the pianist and the pianist is listening to the drummer, or vice versa. It could be any of those combinations. When we're all listening together, we'll ebb and flow together as a community. This music is a community music. It's a very selfless music. And then we talked about groove. What are we feeling? What are we feeling when we're playing? Time and groove are one in the same. And intention, don't rely on your habits. Know what you play, choose what you play. Practice with intention. Practice, hearing different sounds of the cymbal. Hearing different ways you can play on the toms and the snare drum and the bass drum. What different sounds can you make? Truly practice it, and with different dynamics. Truly practice these things with intention. And when you get on the bandstand, you'll be able to play with intention. And all of these things, time, groove, and intention, they're all one. And those three concepts are really the things that I've been striving to have in my playing for a long time now, and I'll continue to strive for time, groove, and intention for the rest of my life. And know that, time, groove, and intention, this is a community concept, right? Music is a community concept. And that's the small, virtual, condensed version of my clinic. Time, groove, intention, the key to being a drummer in a rhythm section. And hopefully I'll see you guys when I'm presenting these clinics at different places around the world, and we can meet and play together in person. And this presentation is in association with Marco Pignataro, who's the director of the Berklee Global Jazz Institute and the teacher of the performance pedagogy class. Thank you all.